Hello and welcome to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keith in the studios of our flagship stations, Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. In addition, today, as always, we're on Birmingham area municipal access. Both of our television stations are on Comcast Channel 15 and AT&T Channel 99. You can also listen to us on the radio in addition to Lakes FM on 88.1 WBFH, the BIF, a service of the Bloomfield Hills School District. We're also online every day, live 10 a.m. to 12 noon, on CivicCenterTV.com. Click on our Watch Live link, or view us in that small player at the top right of your homepage on your computer web browser. If you're on your mobile phone, scroll to the left side of the page when you go to CivicCenterTV.com. There will be a link that says Watch Live. You can watch us live on your mobile phone anywhere, anytime during the Megacast or with our many and varied other programs as well. You can also find us on My Michigan TV, Michigan's very own streaming network. It's a brand new service that is providing content from across the state of Michigan in a number of different genres, a number of different formats, whether it be documentary, news gathering, live programming like this, or the Steve Leto show that comes up after us each and every day from noon to 1 p.m. That is all on My Michigan TV. It's on mymitv.com, 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 and it's also on many of your smart TV app stores as well as your mobile phone app store. Search My Michigan TV and get access not only to the Megacast each and every day on My, but to other great programming like the Steve Leto live program, as well as other live programming and recorded programming from all across the Great Lakes state. And you can also view us every day on our Facebook pages, Civic Center TV 15 and Facebook.com/LakesFM, as I mix them both up. So many pages to remember, and sometimes I just cross those wires. A little programming note today. We are normally 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Today we will end our program 5 minutes early at 11:55 a.m. because of our regular duties here at our flagship station at Civic Center TV, where we provide municipal meeting coverage. We have a West Bloomfield Township Board budget meeting that is coming up at 12 noon. We'll have that live on Lakes FM as well as on Civic Center TV, but we do need to end the program early because of that meeting today. So I just want to let you all know if you tune in a little late in our last interview today at 11:40 that fear not, when we end a little bit early, we are going to be here regularly the rest of the week from 10 a.m. until 12 noon. And you can find more information about the Megacast, about our partnering stations, as well as links to our full interviews and full episodes from each and every day of the program on our website, CivicCenterTV.com/Megacast. And we have links to each and every one of our partnering stations. So if you want to learn more about the services provided by the Birmingham Area Cable Board, which of course is the service that provides Birmingham area municipal access, you can click on that link on our page at CivicCenterTV.com/Megacast and learn more about BAMA. You can also learn more about MyTV as well as 88.1 The BIF by going to our website, CivicCenterTV.com/Megacast. And as I said, any of the interviews we do on this show, if you miss part of the show or you only want to see certain interviews on certain topics, you can find those all through our helpful links at CivicCenterTV.com/Megacast. And then on CivicCenterTV.com/coronavirus, or by clicking on a coronavirus link at the top of our homepage or on your mobile phone, that left side of your screen, we'll have helpful links to resources about COVID-19 from the federal, state, and local level. Of course, we'll have information from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Michigan Health and Human Services Department, Oakland County, but also many of our local municipalities and their individual COVID-19 pages from right here in the Oakland County area. And in addition to all that, we have the top headlines and news stories each and every day. And yesterday we had a lot of talk over the last couple of days, really, about mask mandates in schools. Will they happen? Will they not happen? Some school districts in Oakland County were going down that route. Others were taking more of a pick and choose route where it's optional but recommended, and some were taking no decision at all or saying they would not put mask mandates in place. We talked about that at length with experts not only in schools but also in on the front lines of this pandemic. Of course, we spoke to Dr. Preeti Malani yesterday from the University of Michigan's Division of Infectious Diseases about that issue and more. And then late yesterday evening, the news broke, and this is on our website, a top story today at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus from the Detroit Free Press. Oakland County is mandating masks in all K-12 schools in Oakland County in an emergency order. Again, this is from our friends over at the Detroit Free Press. Students and staff across all schools in Oakland County will be required to wear masks as the school year begins. The Oakland County Health Division issued an indoor mask mandate on Tuesday, citing increasing COVID-19 hospitalizations among children nationwide. Oakland County is the second largest county by population in Michigan, with 200,000 students who will be impacted by the order. Districts include Rochester Community Schools, Troy School District, and Novi School District as well. It's really all of the school districts. In a quote from Dave Coulter, the Oakland County executive, to the Free Press, he said, quote, "Our top priority is keeping students in school for in-person learning." He continued, "Masking is one of the best defenses against increased transmission of COVID-19 and higher hospitalization rates among kids," and closed quote. The order follows other counties in Michigan, including Genesee and Kent counties. While other states have broadly mandated masks, Michigan's state leaders, led by Governor Gretchen Whitmer, left mask mandates up to individual counties. We have an article about her approach to that that's on our website from yesterday's edition of the Megacast, and it's still up there on civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. With Oakland County's order, 152 school districts in Michigan are now under a mask policy, representing 624,000 kids, or about 43.4% of all students in the state, according to Governor Whitmer's office. The uncertainty on the state's level has left some school administrators in a difficult position, pulled into two different directions by community members vehemently opposed to and ardently supportive of mask mandates. Debates over masks reached peak levels in recent weeks, with school board meetings growing chaotic, punctuated by yelling. In Birmingham, one man was thrown out of a meeting for giving a Nazi salute in response to discussions on requiring masks. And we had police presence in West Bloomfield earlier on this week at their school board meeting, which was very cordial and very professional in the dialogue between members of the community and their school board expressing their opinions on masks. Of course, there were several. Most of the people that didn't attend for public comment were against any sort of mask mandate and wanted to have a situation where parents could pick and choose their child's masking or unmasking in the classroom, but it was definitely not nearly as chippy as we've seen in many other places in Michigan and across the U.S. in regards to mask mandates in school districts, and certainly nothing near the level of what was seen earlier this month in Birmingham at their school board meeting. And as time is running out, continuing the article, as time is running out for Michigan schools, which typically begin in the weeks before or after Labor Day, many school districts will start next week, beginning on August 30th. The order also cites studies involving masks in schools, which found that proper masking cuts down COVID transmission in schools, particularly when vaccines aren't available to every age group. The COVID-19 vaccine, of course, is available for children ages 12 and up, but still not authorized for those under the age of 12. State Representative Kelly Breen, a Democrat from Novi, said she was relieved upon hearing the news of the order as a parent of two children. In a quote from Representative Breen, "We see that districts are shutting down, and the last thing we want is for our kids to have to return to virtual learning. Some schools are not even set up for that right now. This is simply, quite simply, the right thing to do," and closed quote. While some Oakland County school districts have mandated masks on their own, others, such as Clarkston, made masks an optional accessory for being back in school. The news for parents in Oakland County was cheered by some and vilified by others. Families flooded the comments section on the county's Facebook post announcing the mandate, leaving notes ranging from "thank you" to "I hate you." That's about any Facebook page for you. Just if you want to go somewhere and just find opinions that are generally toxic and combative, go to Facebook and talk about any sort of controversial topic or highly opinionated topic, and you'll find pretty much that exact same range from "thank you" to "I hate you," as marked in this article. Jason Wantuck, a parent in the Avondale School District, said his two children started school this week, and he supports mask mandates. In a quote from Mr. Wantuck, "Whatever we have to do to get that to happen so that we don't have any further shutdowns. We don't have any further quarantines. We don't have anything that really interrupts the education process as much as possible. Christopher Peace, a parent with 2 sons in Lake Orion School District, said his 5-year-old son is entering kindergarten and has serious health issues. Peace desperately wants his son to experience in-person learning, but the lack of a mask mandate worried him, especially when vaccines aren't available for young children. In a quote from Mr. Peace in this Detroit Free Press article, quote, "I've been fighting for it for quite a while," he said. "For many years, we've sort of been treated as second-class citizens. When your choice of trying to avoid a mere inconvenience can hurt my child, it becomes a major issue for me." So Oakland County taking matters into its own hands, as there was really a mixed bag of reactions in terms of implementing mask mandates or leaving it optional or leaving it to be unrequired or unrecommended altogether. We have an article on our website from a few days ago on civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. And that article, let me just look around and pull it up real quick. I mean, it said Oakland County Public Schools taking action on mask mandates. That kind of gives you a better input on where school districts were as of Monday on this issue. And because there's such a mixed bag and because of the situation we're in, the Oakland County Health Division found it necessary to take its own action, believing that in this case it seems that they believed that most of the school districts either leaving it up to a recommendation and leaving it optional, or those foregoing mandates of any kind altogether were making the wrong decision, and so they decided to intervene and put their own requirements in. Certainly this will be met with some reaction from school districts, from parents, certainly those on the side that do not support mask mandates, and will probably be a lot of negative reaction. I do believe that there is a protest that was already planned for this morning to begin at 10 o'clock in Oakland County to protest that mask mandate from Oakland County. More news on our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. Death, taxes, and storms knocking out power in the local area. Thanks a lot, DTE. This is from the Oakland Press. More storms, more power outages in Metro Detroit. Tens of thousands of Metro Detroiters are once again without power on Wednesday morning after another round of storms passed over the region during the prior evening. The outages come on another day that is expected to be hot, with temperatures approaching 90 degrees and high humidity. At 8 a.m., the company reported 30,500 homes and businesses were without power. The outages are scattered across the region, including Oakland and Mccabe counties, as well as the downriver area in Wayne County as well. They are also stretched into the Thumb area and along the Canadian border in New Baltimore and Algonac. One cluster of outages is in the Waterford and White Lake Township areas, impacting about 5,800 customers. About 6,000 homes and businesses are without power in southern Mccabe County, including Warren and Mount Clemens. About 2,500 were out in southeastern Oakland County, many along I-75 near Royal Oak. Nearly 3,000 lost power in downriver communities of Southgate and Lincoln Park. Most outages did not have a restoration, but 560 DTE crews were in the field as of 8 a.m. this morning. One large outage in Rochester Hills impacting thousands along Tenkin Road has already been restored, according to a review of the DTE Energy outage map. And there is a link in that article, and it is posted on our website, that includes a link to that outage map so you can check it yourself. A heat advisory is in effect until 8 p.m. today, with heat indexes expected to reach into the upper 90s or even up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In a quote from the National Weather Service, quote, "Hot temperatures and high humidity may cause heat illnesses to occur. Drink plenty of fluids. Stay in an air-conditioned room, stay out of the sun, and check up on relatives and neighbors. Young children and pets should never be left unattended in vehicles under any circumstances." These outages follow several major storms this summer, causing widespread outages. Earlier this month, about 1 million Michiganders lost power after 3 major storms passed by in just 2 days. So more power outages, more frustration certainly with DTE, with Consumers Energy, with other energy providers, as we've had these storms come through, knock out people's power once again. And in the past, these outages have sustained themselves for several days, all throughout a week. And we had, of course, other news stories recently on our program on civiccentertv.com/coronavirus about some of the reaction and mitigation efforts or communication efforts that went from DTE Energy and Consumers Energy to their customers. In some cases, customers having several days worth of outages received a $25 stipend from DTE as a oops, sorry, so to speak, for those sustained outages. But $25, I wouldn't think, would cover not being able to work from home if that's your current situation, not being able to sustain your frozen and your refrigerated foods that then go bad and then cause you to have to either go get fresh food from the grocery store or from a restaurant or somewhere else, or have your food go bad, which in some cases, especially for those that are out of work and money is tight, doesn't really help them. And $25 isn't going to bridge that gap. So again, just brings more attention to the issues with our infrastructure locally and across the state that are definitely a hot button issue right now, and puts more pressure on DTE and Consumers Energy, who, let's just say, have not had a very good few weeks and a few months with the recent power outages. Lastly, more frustration with the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, as the Michigan Redistricting Commission's latest challenge is attendance. This from Bridge Michigan magazine, as the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission races to draw the state's new political boundaries, the panel is also faced with an internal issue: absences. The biggest recent offender is Commission Chair Brittany Kellum, a Democrat from Detroit. She has missed 14 of 33, or 42%, of the Commission's meetings since being elected chair on March 18th, according to minutes and other records analyzed by Bridge, Michigan. Overall, Kellum has missed 17 out of 60 meetings since the commission started its work on September 17th of 2020. The commission with the second worst attendance is Juanita Curry, also a Democrat, who missed 9 out of 60 meetings since September. In the last 3 meetings, 3 members of the 13-member commission have been absent, raising concerns with the panel that was close to lacking a quorum for many of those meetings. Just on Monday, Rhonda Lang, a Republican, joined the panel via Zoom, but was hesitant to support a motion to extend the length of the meeting. In a quote, she said, quote, "I'm not feeling good today, and I'm here today just to make sure we have a quorum," end close quote. The spate of missed sessions prompted a reminder from the organization whose efforts led to the commission's creation through a statewide vote in 2018. Nancy Wong, executive director of Voters Not Politicians, noted in a statement to Bridge, Michigan, that the commission's work will have an impact on voting rights and political boundaries for the next decade. In a quote from her, she said, "The public needs every commissioner to show up and actively participate in every aspect of the redistricting process." The state's redistricting commission has 13 members, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 independents. According to rules adopted by the panel, a quorum consists of 9 commissioners and must include at least 1 member from each of the 3 groups, Republicans, Democrats, and independents. In addition to missing 17 meetings overall, Kellum, the commission chair, arrived late to 3 other meetings and twice left meetings early, according to records obtained by Bridge, Michigan. In a statement, Kellum told Bridge on Tuesday she has been open with the commission, quote, regarding any unexpected personal and family health challenges and work conflicts, especially against the necessarily evolving Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission schedule. She continued on, "Like other Michigan residents, I'm the only commissioner who works full time. I do my best to juggle all of my responsibilities efficiently, effectively, and ethically," said Kellum. "Nevertheless, I remain committed and resolute in raising my voice to ensure fair maps through public engagement." So, on one hand, yes, these are independent citizens who are volunteering their time to work on redistricting in the state of Michigan, as opposed to punting that to our politicians who, depending on what party is in power in our state legislature at the time, will tip the scales one way or another. The whole point of this is to prevent gerrymandering and to make our election processes in the state of Michigan, particularly the arrangement of districts at federal level and for state elections, to be much more fair and less tipped in the balances of the party in power. That being said, even though these are independent citizens, even though these are people that are providing their time in addition to everything else they do in life, they knew what they signed up for. And they signed up to be part of this process, to be vital in the future of Michigan's voting districts. And if you're not willing to show up, be there on time, stay for the entire meetings, and go through these processes and do them efficiently and get this process done in a way that's going to, A, make it look like it was worthwhile, and B, fulfill the mission, then you shouldn't be on the commission and you shouldn't have signed up in the first place. So read more from that article, learn more details on Bridge Michigan Magazine's article by going to our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, where we have a direct link to that and more. We got a great show coming up for you today. In the first hour, I'll speak with Laura Misumi from Rising Voices. She is their executive director. That's coming up next. Then at the end of the hour, the son of Swami, Mick Mccabe, joins me from the Detroit Free Press. He's a high school sports writer. We'll talk about high school football, which we'll be covering here, of course, at Lakes FM. Coming up at the end of this week, when West Bloomfield Lakers, the defending Division I state champions, take on the Rochester Adams Highlanders to kick off their season. So I'll talk with Mick Mccabe about the upcoming season, about some of our West Bloomfield Lakers and what can be expected from the defending champs, and more. Then we got more great interviews coming up in the 11 o'clock hour, including Carrie Krawiec, a therapist from the Birmingham Maple Clinic. That and more coming up. You're watching and listening to the Megacast.
One of the things you can look for in your friends is a change in behavior. These can be big changes, they can be small changes in mood, physical appearance. They may be sleeping less or sleeping more, drinking more, or their eating patterns may be different. One big change that can be pretty obvious is change in motivation. Do they no longer want to play basketball? Do they no longer want to play video games? Now that we're spending more time online and in virtual settings, it's really important to pay attention to the language that your friend is using and the words they're using to communicate. So when we text our friends, are they taking longer amounts of time to respond? Are they not responding at all? You don't have to be an expert to try to recognize these signs. The second that you feel it in your gut and that you're concerned, that's the second to have the conversation and open the door to what might be going on.
Whatever gets you talking. Today, it is easier than ever to join Michigan's Organ Donor Registry and help build a bridge of hope for organ, tissue, and eye donation. Just one person can potentially save or help improve the lives of up to 75 people. By joining, your legacy could be the gift of life. Sign up today at michigan.gov/SOS or at any of the more than 145 Secretary of State self-service stations located across Michigan. Be part of Michigan's Bridge of Hope by adding your name to the Organ Donor Registry.
When times get dark, we can't see the help that's all around us. When you don't know where to turn, let 211 be your guiding light.
How can I help you?
Our guides are ready to connect you with the help you need. For help with food, healthcare, mental health, and other resources. Call 211 or visit 211.org. 211. Get connected, get help.
How does marijuana affect the teen brain?
Our brains are still developing into our 20s.
With regular use, marijuana can affect teen brain development.
It can affect our brain's circuitry and blood flow and impair thinking, learning, and memory function,
Which could hold us back from reaching our potential.
Don't let marijuana mess with your brain.
Get the facts at michigan.gov/drug-free.
I couldn't breathe at all. There was lots of talk about putting me on a ventilator. I thought I was gonna die. I was 39 weeks pregnant and had a scheduled C-section. During that time, I got COVID and was hospitalized for a month. I had a blood clot in my lungs. It caused me to go into right-sided heart failure. I was really scared. I kept texting my husband and my mom, telling them how scared I was, and I was worried that he was gonna grow up without a mom. And then I was worried if, when I did get home, that he wouldn't know who I was. You know, being 27 and a mom and a wife and having that all almost taken away from me. It's scary, and if a vaccine can prevent that from happening, why not? Get your vaccine. I don't want this to happen to anybody else.
Welcome back to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe in our studios here in West Bloomfield Township alongside our studio engineer, Calvin Brown, with me each and every day, here in our Lakes FM studios from Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 12 noon as we continue to talk about a number of issues affecting our community here in southeastern Michigan, really throughout the state of Michigan, not just COVID-19, but other major issues as well, including what we talked about in the first segment with our last story regarding some attendance issues and participation issues with the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission and how that affects many of our communities, including our Asian American communities. And we're pleased to be joined by Laura Misumi. She is the Executive Director of Rising Voices, once again with us today. Laura, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate having you on. Let's start with the census issue because according to our U.S. Census data, the 2020 data that's come in, the Michigan's Asian population has risen by 40%. Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander population has risen by 17%. So according to our state's data, our Asian American populations are on the rise, and really across the board we've seen a number of diverse populations in the state of Michigan be on the rise according to this data. Do you believe that with this particular census there's any particular reason why that representation would have grown, or is it just a significant number of people that are coming into the state and maybe believe that Michigan is a more welcoming place to live than other places in the country?
Actually, I think that what this data shows is kind of, it's proof positive for what we have seen and what we've known, that, our Asian American population in the state of Michigan has been growing. We're one of the fastest growing racial groups in the state and in the country, honestly. And I think a lot of that is because of the extended and long-term presence of Asian American communities here in Michigan. I think that that is something that we at Rising Voices feel like it's very important to highlight. A lot of folks are maybe new immigrants, but they may be, coming from different parts of the country, and they're coming here because they know that there are communities that are here for them, and that there are resources, there are amenities that speak to them and their cultures and their communities. And I think that being able to acknowledge, recognize, celebrate the Asian American communities that have been in Michigan for a really long time is incredibly important, and also speaks to the importance of having reflective representation that is accountable and responsive to our communities.
And let's continue on with the representation note, because it's not just people that are coming in from these communities from different places across the world, or other situations such as families that have been here, or others that are joining their families in our communities here in Michigan from around the world, and then are eventually down the line gaining citizenship or are citizens. And regardless of the situation, whether they are voting citizens or are here on a visa for work or are here with family, whatever the case may be, their representation in our government and in our communities is vitally important, especially as populations of Asian American communities continue to grow, and even more importantly, because of what we have experienced here in the United States, just in a more inflated and present manner, at least in our mainstream media and our presence of mind in the last several months, but really issues that have been ongoing for a number of years, but have just more recently been brought to the forefront, albeit for horrible reasons and under horrible aspects.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that, for us, specifically here in Michigan and in the Midwest at large, but specifically here in Michigan, we know that oftentimes the racial narrative of the dynamics here in Michigan are primarily white and Black, and sometimes also Latinx and Indigenous. But for us, we want to make sure that Asian Americans are a part of that picture, and that we are encouraging newcomers, Asian Americans that are coming from different parts of the country, or Asians coming from different parts of the world, are coming to Michigan understanding the context of how the built environment got to be the way that it is, and how the current climate that we're living in, the one way that we believe is necessary to be able to fight back against anti-Asian hate or stereotypes, or this perception that we're the perpetual foreigners, is through solidarity with other communities of color, specifically BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities here in Michigan, and that we understand, that representation, it's not just about having a face that looks like mine, it's also about having representation of folks that represent my values, that understand where I'm coming from, and that are going to be, making policy decisions using that full context and kind of understanding what it means to be a person of color writ large, and not just an Asian American.
We're joined by Laura Misumi. She is the Executive Director of Rising Voices with us today on the Megacast. And it becomes even more concerning when we look at the situations where we've had these horrible hate crimes that have been committed against people in the Asian American community. Certainly the attacks that happened earlier on this year are those on the forefront, but really it becomes reflective of other situations on other communities in the past. Particularly, I think about we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, and I think about the attacks that came on communities that practice Islam, Muslim communities, on Arab American communities that had to experience that. Well, they didn't have to experience it. They did experience that in the wake of 9/11, and are still experiencing that today. Heck, I just read a really unfortunate article recently about a student that was bullied on the playground at school because she was wearing a hijab and was called a terrorist by a fellow student, which is absolutely horrible. And that makes this situation even more important as we go into redistricting and as we're considering different means of constructing our voting districts to make sure that we are getting that input and we are encouraging that representation so that we can address these issues from people that are affected by these issues, not just people that are listening or making talking points and promising to address the issue.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think for us, Rising Voices, we're a pan-Asian American organization. A huge part of our base are South Asian Muslims, and we work with the Arab American community here as well. And that's been a kind of a formative moment for the Muslim American community in this country. And as a Japanese American myself, I remember the importance of Japanese American and Muslim American solidarity post 9/11, and that is something that really that's the value that really drives our work today. And I think that again is an incredibly important point when it comes to things like redistricting, when it comes to having reflective democracy and representation that's accountable to our communities. First and foremost, the commission needs to know that our communities are here, that we exist, that we've been in Michigan. We've been critical parts of our communities across the state, in Oakland County, et cetera, for many decades now. And also that it's really important too for a lot of our representation that we currently have in the state legislature to understand that you do have Asian American constituents, and that those Asian American constituents have long noted that bullying based on race, based on religion, and especially in the past year, is a huge concern for parents. And making sure that our school environments are inclusive and equitable and are teaching a fully inclusive and culturally appropriate curriculum is something that's really important for us as well.
We're joined by Laura Misumi. She is the Executive Director of Rising Voices with us on the Megacast. And there's been so much more of an emphasis, or at least slightly more of an emphasis, that just seems inflated because it's been there's been such underrepresentation since the dawn of Hollywood and since the dawn of major mainstream entertainment. There seems to be more of an effort more recently to include more representation of diverse communities across television, across movies, certainly in the news as well, to provide a different look at these communities, a more truthful look at communities of color, of BIPOC communities, certainly, so that we have that representation. We're getting more than just those typical stereotypes that we've seen played out time and time again in movies and in television and in the way that news stories are reported. And that becomes impactful too on these communities, especially when they're experiencing an increased wave of hate crimes and of hateful speech in school, kids and their bullying. A new study shows that over half of Asian film roles serve as a punchline where they are laughing at the Asian character and not with them. How much of a difference does it make when we have, for those that are in these communities, that are in Asian American communities, that are in BIPOC communities, how much of a difference does it make for them specifically to be able to see representation of their communities in film, in television, in the news, that is more along the lines of what their actual experiences are?
Yeah, I mean, it has a huge impact. I think for us, that is a reflection of power dynamics in this country. Who gets to write the scripts, who gets to greenlight projects, who gets to be at the helm in making those stories, and how important it is to make sure that we're elevating and being inclusive in terms of who gets to tell our own stories, rather than having folks from outside of our communities and cultures be the ones that are painting the picture of who we are and what we look like. I think it's incredibly important for our communities to be able to see themselves well represented. I think that one thing that we often say is culture eats strategy for breakfast, and we can organize and talk to as many people as possible, but oftentimes what we can imagine as a possibility for us to be able to achieve is often set by culture. It's by the things that we see on TV, that we read online, etc. And being able to make sure that we're part of that picture is incredibly important. Our communications director, Jasmine Rivera, is the filmmaker and is also helming a project for us called DIY Power, which will be a short film series that we really want to put Asian Americans front and center as change makers in our own lives and in our own communities. And we think that that's incredibly important. We see all the diversity of the different stories that get told about white folks, honestly, but then like increasingly over time for other communities as well. We're not defined solely by our racial or ethnic experience. We too experience love and loss and hardship. And I think being able to expand the imagination of what's possible for Asian Americans who want to go into film, who want to go into the visual arts and may not see themselves represented, and also for their parents and families who might not see that as a viable career option. All of that is set by what we see, and how viable it feels is very much set by the culture. So being able to include more Asian American, more diverse voices in that story is incredibly important.
It's important in drawing that inspiration and that hope from people that are in these communities, but also in drawing empathy and sympathy from those that are not in those communities. Because the more you see people that are different from you represented all across the board in your life, the better understanding you can have of their experiences, of your shared experiences, and expand your worldview, expand your view of different walks of life, and hopefully that ends up in a situation where it inspires more love and respect among differing populations, and maybe stomps down on some of this hate that we've seen really on the rise over the past several years, or at least more visible to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for us, we believe that there's so many different avenues that needs to take place, right? So obviously it's about building interpersonal relationships within your own community with your neighbors. It's about being able to expand the visibility of Asian Americans across a whole range of visual media, but it's also about making sure that curriculum is inclusive and that we are ensuring that the full history of the United States, which includes Asian Americans for many centuries, is part of that curriculum, and so too about other communities of color. The story that's so often gets told really centers a certain type of American and a certain type of American experience, but we are made all the richer by having a diversity of that experience and a number of different stories that we can relate to, because I think a lot of what our American experience is, though it includes hardship, that is how we build solidarity. That's how we build those bonds of mutual respect across lines of difference.
We're joined by Laura Misumi. She is the Executive Director of Rising Voices with us today on the Megacast. And Laura, we appreciate your time. We have a couple more minutes with you today before we'll say goodbye. Before we do, are there any more important issues at this time that our communities need to make themselves more aware of or should be informed of that affect our Asian American communities and our BIPOC communities, so that we can continue these important dialogues, and not only that, but continue to be more introspective and consider our own individual roles in the paradigms that we're in right now and the ways we need to change our society in order to be more inclusive and be more friendly and be more respectful?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think there's many things on the interpersonal as well as the structural levels. I think we talked about the census and just the rise of Asian Americans here in the state of Michigan, the importance of Asian Americans to participate in the redistricting process by submitting comment, by creating maps that show our communities of interest, where we live and what we do, because that is so tied up in how our districts are drawn, who represents us. Voters should be electing their leaders, and leaders shouldn't get to define, who's their constituency. We are here. We need to be more visible. Rising Voices engages in a number of different efforts to make sure that we're both going on the civic engagement front as well as the cultural and organizing front, because that narrative is incredibly important. We know school board elections are up next year as well. It's really important too that we consider running for office, that we are encouraging folks that we know would be great candidates to also run and support inclusive curriculum that reflects all the students that are attending these schools.
Well, Laura, we appreciate your time. If people want to get more involved with Rising Voices or learn more information, how can they get in contact with you?
definitely find us on Facebook and Instagram right now. Our website is undergoing construction, so but find us on Facebook at Rising Voices AAF. And we are always looking for volunteers. We'd love to hear from folks, so please feel free to comment, send us a message.
Laura, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Laura Misumi, she is the Executive Director of Rising Voices, with us today on the Megacast. Find more information on Rising Voices at risingvoicesaaf.org. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of the break, we'll transition to speaking about sports. We got high school football season. It's going to be beginning tomorrow throughout the state of Michigan. We'll have the beginning of our high school football coverage here on Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM on Friday as the West Bloomfield Lakers take on the Rochester Adams Highlanders at home at West Bloomfield High School at the Swamp at 7 o'clock p.m. Our coverage will begin at about 6:30. So we'll speak with Mick Mccabe, high school sports writer and contributor to the Detroit Free Press. On the other side of the break, you're watching and listening to the Megacast.
A message from the staff of Michigan's Crime Victim Compensation Program.
Anyone can be a victim of crime
and suffer lasting trauma, physically, emotionally, and financially.
But you are not alone.
If you're struggling financially due to a crime,
we're here
for you.
Find out if you qualify for crime victim compensation.
Call 877-251-7373 or visit michigan.gov/crime victim.
A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Victim Services.
You see certain things get reincarnated in your children. My daughter is very much inspired by my wife's artistic pursuits. So my daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. And if there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around, and I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanting to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you didn't. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
Who is struggling right now?
I am.
My son is.
Many are struggling with anxiety, depression, and substance use. Before it becomes a crisis, reach out to Mccabe, the Michigan Crisis and Access Line, for free confidential support 24/7. Available in the Upper Peninsula and Oakland County. Just call or text 1-844-44-MyCal or chat online at michigan.gov/MyCal. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Welcome back to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keith in our studios here in West Bloomfield Township as we continue to talk about COVID-19 and a number of other issues and interesting topics that affect our communities, not only in Oakland County and southeastern Michigan, but throughout the state. And something that I think a lot of people are going to be very, very happy to see is going back into their local high schools' football stadiums and enjoying some games this fall, as they'll be back in person. Crowds will be back. The players will be back without wearing masks, and they're going to be having a really exciting football season after what was an exciting, although unique, football season in 2020. And we're pleased to be joined by Mick Mccabe, high school sports writer and contributor to the Detroit Free Press, with us now on the Megacast. Mick, thanks for being with us today.
Great to be here.
Appreciate having you on. So as we head into this high school football season, different from last year, what are some of those differences as we kind of return back to a more normal paradigm on the gridiron for these teams? What sort of is the vibe at most of these training camps that these schools are going through, and as they're practicing and preparing for that first game that's different from the situation a year ago?
Well, we're playing on opening night.
Yeah.
Opening night last year was postponed. We had the first 3 games of the regular season wiped out, and then they started the schedule like with game 4, and to make up for that, the MHSA said, okay, everybody's going to make the state playoffs this year, which, you know, in the last 19 years or whatever, only 256 teams made the state playoffs. So basically they doubled the size of the state playoffs last year. And then, you know, during the playoffs, we had the interruption, and who I mean, we didn't really know if we were going to get to finish the season last year. So now, we're getting ready to go, and everybody's very optimistic. They're glad fans can be back and all that. And I'm thrilled that Oakland County has a mask update mandate now, because I think it's really important in schools, especially elementary schools and some high schools too, because not everybody has been vaccinated, and those schools could be super spreader events every day.
Yeah, and we looked at last season. We look at last season and the ways that COVID-19 outbreaks affected these teams and their seasons. Certainly, it caused the suspension of the season multiple times. Certainly, these cases had ended certain games and caused teams to forfeit. And I think about our matchup here in West Bloomfield coming up on Friday, Rochester Adams. It ended their season. They made the playoffs in that expanded playoff, and they had a COVID case pop up on their team and had to forfeit in the early rounds of the playoffs when they were really hitting their stride. And so for teams like that, like a Rochester Adams that's coming back this season after having their season really effectively ended by COVID-19, are you finding that teams, as they're preparing for this season, have extra motivation and are even more hungry to compete and to battle and to go and really play hard for a chance at a championship in a successful season than ever before?
Yeah, well, only a little bit hungrier and more motivated, because kids are always motivated come football season. The opener is always a huge deal. Last year was last year, and we want to do things a little different this year, but they're motivated all right. They already were motivated, even if last year would have been a normal year.
We're joined by Mick Mccabe. He is a high school sports writer and contributor for the Detroit Free Press, with us today on the Megacast. And Mick, you recently released your top 50 players as well as your top 25 teams. And just looking here in West Bloomfield, we have 3 players on that top 50 list: Dylan Tatum, defensive back and running back; linebacker Michael Williams; and offensive lineman Amir Herring. And the defending champion Lakers ranked at number 11. Now the Lakers still coming back with a lot of the talent that they had last year, a lot of veteran presence. Of course, those 3 players are just some of the many players that are returning from that championship team that did play a key role, but they're also a younger team. And is that part of the reason why, on top of the coaching change with Ron Bellamy exiting to become the defensive backs coach at the University of Michigan, that we're seeing the Lakers a little bit lower ranked to begin the season than we have in recent years?
Yeah, well, you can't lose your coach and be without having some problems early on. Mm-hmm. But more than that, Donovan Edwards was the best player in the state last year. Yeah, I mean, you don't lose the best player in the state and say, we're going to go win the state championship game again. Now, maybe they will, because the Lakers are very talented once again. But it's going to be a lot more difficult than it was last year. And it wasn't a breeze until they really got going in the state playoffs.
We're joined by Mick Mccabe on the Megacast. He is the high school sports writer and contributor to the Detroit Free Press. And the losses on their team are significant. They're bringing a lot of people back. Tyrese Rice, their new head coach, played a key role in that championship team and in building this program at West Bloomfield as their defensive coordinator, and he has head coaching experience. So it's not to say that he's not capable of running this team like Coach Bellamy was, or that this team doesn't still have a high level of talent. But there's a lot of change. You lose your star player in Donovan Edwards graduating, and he moved on, goes to the University of Michigan. You lose your head coach who moves on after completing the circle, winning a championship, and moves on to the University of Michigan. You lose your veteran quarterback who had been a starter as a freshman before transferring to West Bloomfield, was a 2-year starter here, and now you have a little bit of a quarterback battle there between Rick Nance and Thomas Belazovic, which seems to be leaning more toward West Bloomfield. But there are a lot of teams that are coming into this year with a lot of promise. Who are some of those other teams, not just in southeastern Michigan, but really across the board, that you think are going to be the kings of the hill, those other teams that are developing, that are rebuilding, or that are also contending, are going to be looking at and saying, those are our targets?
Well, number one, overall, the entire state, we have DeWitt, Division III team, and they've got 8 starters back on offense, including their quarterback, Tyler Holtz, who's just really, really good. He's only about 5'10", so he's not a major college prospect, but he's going to go to the Ivy League at Brown and play at Brown. So he's getting an Ivy League education. They have a receiver, Tommy McIntosh, who's already committed to Wisconsin, and they have a tremendous coach, Rob Zimmerman, and they dismantled River Rouge last year in the D3 state championship game, and Rouge, they'll never gave up and came back to make a game of it for sure. But I think they're the best team in the state overall. And then outstate, go further out, Traverse City Central. And those two teams are playing at Michigan this week. Traverse City Central used to be, 25, 30 years ago, before they split into Traverse City Central, Traverse City West. They were a powerhouse every year. They won multiple state championships for Jim Uli. And Uli always said, because there was talk of adding a second school, he goes, if they had a second school, I'm out of here. And as soon as they did, he was gone. And so they lost something when they have to share all their talent with another school, and they would be Division I if it was still just one school, and they would still be an absolute powerhouse. Well, this is their best team since the split. And last year, Central made a nice run to the semifinals, but I think they're capable of, if they put it together. They have Josh Burnham, who's going to Notre Dame as a linebacker, but he's also a quarterback, and he's just an athlete playing quarterback, a tough runner, and he can throw the ball. He's really going to be good. Grand Rapids Catholic Central, they're Division V, and they've won the last couple state championships, and they can compete in any division and be competitive. I'm not going to say they would win Division I state championship, but they could win a lot of playoffs games in Division I, in Division II, and Division III. I mean, they're really good. People don't realize how good they are. Muskegon is always going to be good. Rockford really got it together late in the season. So, yeah, we have a lot of talent out state, too.
And in terms of other teams that are not necessarily in that top 5, even in your top 25 necessarily, who are some of the teams that you believe will be surprises, not only in Division I, but really across the board in the state of Michigan? What are some of those teams that you think we'll be looking at mid-season and late season and saying this team's gaining momentum, they could make a run and maybe be one of those teams that upsets some of those kings of the hill at the top?
Yeah, well, Fordson is going to get better as the season goes on, and perhaps they can beat Belleville because Belleville's been the class of their league for several years now. Canton, they were a state power. I mean, they never won a state championship, but they got to state finals, and they were always now they've got some good players. This is the best team since Tim Beckler retired. And Kingsley in Division V, it's too bad Grand Rapids Catholic Central settled there because Kingsley could win a state championship too. So we've got a lot of talent.
We're joined by Mick Mccabe. He is the high school sports writer and contributor for the Detroit Free Press with us on the Megacast today. And we can't go into a season like this without acknowledging what's also going on at the college football level, as we're going into a college football season now where for the first time players kind of have full control of their brand with name, image, and likeness, regulations being more or less lifted in many cases, or severely less regulated at the college level. In terms of high school, of course, that's not going to be the same case at the high school level by any means, but it's going to have some effect on recruiting. How much of an impact do you believe that the new name, image, and likeness situation at the college level is going to have an impact in the minds of these high school students, especially those at the top levels that are going to be heavily recruited as they make their college plans and not only think about their future on the gridiron and in the classroom, but also about their growing brands as football players as well?
Well, all you need to know about is the number 1 ranked quarterback in the country is from Texas. Mm-hmm. And he skipped his senior year to enroll at Ohio State, so he can start cashing in right now. And you always have to worry about the unintended consequences of any rule you put in. And with this, it's going to create a lot of jealousy in the locker room on kids who are making money off of this and kids who aren't. And then there's also the, schools that kind of press the envelope a little bit. And what are they going to promise kids with the NIL when they're trying to recruit them? I mean, come here and we know our boosters are going to buy whatever you sell. You're going to make a lot of money. And I don't know if the NCAA thought that through all the way.
We're joined by Mick Mccabe, high school sports writer and contributor with the Detroit Free Press, joining us today on the Megacast. And Mick, we have a few more minutes with you, so
sure.
Let's go and look forward and make some predictions. It's really early. It's way too early to determine who we think are necessarily the major contenders. Of course, we have our rankings and we have our opinions based on what we've seen in the past and what situations these teams are coming back into. But right now, who are the teams that you're looking at, particularly in Division One, as that affects the teams that we cover mostly in West Bloomfield and Orchard Lake and so on? What are these? Who are the teams that you believe right now are the most likely to be champions? Or who is your prediction in Division One this year, particularly for a state champion?
I think, it's going to be in tomorrow's paper, and I have to recall what I did, but I think I picked Novi Detroit Catholic Central to win the Division One state championship. And that'll be tough because they're going to, somewhere along the line, they're going to have to match up with Belleville and then, West Bloomfield down the road. So it won't be easy, but I think Catholic Central has a lot of kids back. Declan Lyle is a very talented quarterback. You got a good defense, and I think CC is going to win a state title this year.
Yeah, Catholic Central has been one of those teams that has been a contender and has been extremely competitive in Division One over the last several years. West Bloomfield matched up with them in the playoffs very recently, just a few years back, and that was a highly competitive game. It's one of those teams that, whether they are one of the top dogs out there or they're more middle of the road, they're always going to give the best of the best a lot of trouble on the football field, especially at playoff time. They're a really well prepared team every single year, and of course they come in this year loaded again with talent. So that's a team that's going to be in contention. And Division One is an extremely competitive division in the MHSAA on the football field this season. So it's going to be a really interesting season on top of not just having on top of just the fact that we're having a regular season. We're going to have fans back in the stands, and we're going to have a season that's beginning on time, and hopefully all goes well and it continues to operate on a timely schedule and doesn't meet any of those sorts of blockades that we had or stoppages that we had last season, because it looks like it's going to be a highly competitive and exciting season of football. Mick, before we let you go, anything else that you'd like to say, or anything other interesting stories that we should know as we head into the high school football season?
No, there's a lot of good stories out there. Harper Woods is going to join the OAA. I mean, that'll be the first non-Oakland County school, and they open up. They're still an independent for football this year, but every other sport, beginning with the winter season, is going to be in the OAA. So that's something that's, and then Harper Woods will be in football next fall. So that's something that's hanging out there. And then also we're using this year for football the expanded playoff point average, enhanced playoff point average system, where you can get more wins for losing than you have in the past, which is supposed to encourage teams to play bigger schools and take a chance. At least they're not going home empty-handed if they lose, because it's so hard to schedule now, and this may help them schedule future opponents, but it hasn't helped this year because we got too many teams playing out-of-state teams, or the Catholic League playing teams from Ontario, and that's never good.
Well, Mick, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Anytime, guys.
Mick Mccabe with us, high school sports writer and contributor with the Detroit Free Press. You can you can save $10 on his new book, Mick Mccabe's Golden Yearbook: 50 Great Years of Michigan's Best High School Players, Teams, and Memories, by ordering them right now at mccabe.pictorialbook.com. And you can also contact him at mick.mccabe11@gmail.com to learn more about that and about everything else that's going on with his writing for the Detroit Free Press as we head in to the football season. But that's a really great book, really great, a lot of history in there, and we're continuing to build history, and he's continuing to cover it for us here on the football field and across the board in high school sports here in the state of Michigan, so we appreciate his time. You're watching and listening to the Megacast across the state of Michigan on a number of partnering television and radio stations, including right here on your radio home for the Megacast, 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, and our chief radio partner out of Bloomfield Hills, the Biff, 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. We'll return after the break with more. You're watching and listening to the Megacast.
I couldn't breathe at all. There was lots of talk about putting me on a ventilator. I thought I was gonna die. I was 39 weeks pregnant and had a scheduled C-section. During that time, I got COVID and was hospitalized for a month. I had a blood clot in my lungs. It caused me to go into right-sided heart failure. I was really scared. I kept texting my husband and my mom, telling them how scared I was, and I was worried that he was gonna grow up without a mom. And then I was worried if, when I did get home, that he wouldn't know who I was. You know, being 27 and a mom and a wife and having that all almost taken away from me. It's scary, and if a vaccine can prevent that from happening, why not? Get your vaccine. I don't want this to happen to anybody else.
Motorcyclists are hard to see. To keep everyone safer, it's important to always look for them and know where most crashes occur. 84% of motorcycle and vehicle crashes happen on streets, not highways. And most crashes with motorcyclists occur when vehicle drivers are turning left. So before turning, especially to the left, make sure you look for motorcyclists. Then look again. It could save a life.
Back to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe in our studios here in West Bloomfield Township as we continue to bring you news about COVID-19 and other interesting and important topics throughout southeastern Michigan and across the state. Of course, you're watching us on Civic Center TV and Birmingham Area Municipal Access, on public television and cable stations, on Comcast Channel 15 and AT&T Channel 99 in the local area. But if you don't have Comcast, you don't have AT&T, you don't have cable, you can't watch us on cable television, you can watch us online on civiccentertv.com, on facebook.com/civiccentertv15, facebook.com/lakesfm, as well as on My Michigan TV at mymi.com, mymitv.com as My Michigan TV, Michigan's new streaming network. You can also find that on your smart TV and on your smartphone app stores as well. And we're pleased to be joined now by Nate Adams, film critic at theonlycritic.com, to talk about movies and more. We're pleased to be joined by him. Nate, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Tyler.
So we're approaching the fall season. It's not usually a very fast-paced and interesting season for movies. It's definitely not the Christmas season, the holiday season, and summer. But are there movies that people should be excited for coming up here in the fall, or should be looking out for and maybe consider heading to the theaters to watch?
Yeah, so you're right in that the fall season is usually not robust. It's usually kind of quiet down, and there's film festivals happening. You have Telluride in August, Toronto Film Festival happens in September, and those film festivals kind of set up the picture for the rest of the year. And so those festivals are happening, but this year is very unique because a lot of films that were pushed because of the pandemic, a lot of them, your James Bond's No Time to Die, your Venom, Let Them Be Carnage, Dune, all those films got pushed into the fall because studios were optimistic that the state of the country and the health of, the world would be in a much better place. Although that's still kind of up for debate right now, it looks like a lot of these film release dates, for the most part, are stick with a few caveats. So Venom, Let Them Be Carnage, which is a sequel to Venom, starring Tom Hardy, which is the Sony Spider-Man universe, is coming out as of right now on October 15th. It was supposed to come out September 24th. They pushed it up a couple weeks. Now there are rumors circling again that Sony might be pushing it to January. There's the Addams Family 2 sequel, which is an animated film that's coming out October 1st, although MGM just recently announced they are going to go day and date with it, which means it is going to be available to rent at home because a lot of children under the age of 12 cannot be vaccinated, and some states are imposing mandates, so that kind of limits that audience. So you're not going to see a lot of exclusive family-friendly titles coming to theaters. But as far as what to look out for, I'm really excited for Top Gun Maverick, which is supposed to come out in November. The aforementioned James Bond No Time to Die, which is honestly ironic that its name is No Time to Die because No Time to Come Out has been pushed about 8 times. And I think now the MGM is kind of in a bind because every time a studio people don't know this, but every time the studio pushes their release date, so James Bond is the perfect example, is that when it's pushed its release date, it had all these tie-ins already set up with Lexus dealers and Rolex, like all these merchandise tie-ins. So every time a movie gets pushed, it's a complete restart of that film's marketing campaign, which costs like hundreds of millions of dollars. And they have just pushed it so many times that I really think that at this point, they really can't afford to do it again. So I think that release date sticks. I'm a big Edgar Wright fan, so I'm excited to see his Last Night in Soho. And then the teenager in me, the adolescent, is really excited to see the 4th Jackass film, Jackass Forever. Johnny Knoxville and all those crazy guys doing some fun stunts. So I'm a sucker for those kind of things.
We're joined by Nate Adams. He's a film critic. You can find his work on theonlycritic.com. He's also a Rotten Tomatoes film critic as well. Joining us today on the Megacast. And so you mentioned the pushing back of some of these blockbuster films being released due to the COVID pandemic. Over the summer, more of these were starting to get released on more regular schedules after they were scheduled for postponed release over the summer. Now with the situation that we have, given the Delta variant and the spread of COVID-19 being on an uptick, not only here in the state of Michigan, but certainly in greater capacity across other parts of the U.S., are we at a point now where theaters are starting to get concerned that they may be affected again by more apprehension to go to the theater or by potential regulations and shutdowns coming back, not just in Michigan necessarily, but really across the board? And how are they maybe reacting to that?
I think we're just kind of at a wait and see approach right now. If you ask any theater owner, everybody's optimistic because, like I said, the fall is very, very, very robust this year, which is very unusual. It's a strong, strong fall lineup that really could kind of keep theaters floating until the Christmas corridor if everything goes as planned. So Marvel next week is a big test. There's a big test next week. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is coming out via Marvel Studios film next Friday, Labor Day weekend, which the Labor Day corridor has notoriously been slow as it is. I think, believe it or not, the biggest opening weekend for Labor Day weekend was Rob Zombie's Halloween in like 2007 with like $30 million, and it's held on to that for a long time. So that just shows you how not busy that stretch is. So that's going to be a test because Disney also made the decision not to release the film at home via either Disney Plus or streaming video on demand release. It is just exclusively in theaters. And we saw with these last 2 weeks with the film Free Guy starring Ryan Reynolds that theatrical exclusivity seems to be a crucial point because films like Black Widow and Jungle Cruise, all those films, Space Jam and New Legacy, all those films opened with an at-home streaming component. And you would notice that they would have big opening weekends, not so much Jungle Cruise, but Black Widow, and they have good opening weekends, and then they dropped like 70% on their second weekends because everybody had already seen it at home or the diehard fans already came out. That didn't happen with Free Guy. Free Guy actually had the best second weekend hold of the summer, so it shows longevity. But it also helps that a lot of people are reacting to the film and seem to really enjoy it. And that, like I said, the only place that they can see it is in a theater, which is important. So going forward, that is going to be crucial. If Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings kind of has a so-so box office weekend next weekend for the long Labor Day weekend, you're going to start seeing a lot of studios making the decision whether or not they're going to keep their film in theaters exclusively, or they're going to push it, or they're going to do both, do day and date. But at this point, a lot of this product is getting old and has been sitting on the shelf for a while. They have to start making a judgment call, and if it's not going to get better we're not going to get back to 2019 levels at least until next year. So it's just whether or not the studios are willing to take that chance. And also nowadays we have to judge, the metrics are different, right? Box office doesn't necessarily mean as much as it did back in the day, right? You would see a movie open, had a good opening weekend, it made money, but now you have to ask yourself, well, it has a streaming component attached to it. Did it attract subscribers? There was a lot of talk of the Suicide Squad a couple weeks ago, did not do very well box office wise, but then there's the argument, well, did it attract subscribers for HBO Max? And I think that is where the new metric of success is going to be.
Well, and as these films continue to have their release dates pushed back, it also causes a reaction, not just for the studios and for distributors, for the theaters, and of course for the other brands that are partnering with these films in marketing campaigns. It also has I would presume it also has a major effect on the fans that are going to go and watch these films. Are you finding that, or are theaters and distributors finding that fans have become less eager to go to the theater with these release dates being pushed back, or less likely to see these films because they're being pushed back so many times?
So I think your diehard fans, your diehard Marvel fans prove this with Black Widow's opening weekend being like $80 million, and we'll see how Shang-Chi does next week. Those people are always going to go to the movies no matter what. They're going to be their first 45-day window, which is what they're talking about, is going to be the new standard, and that people will go to those people will go. Now you have to get the people that are still kind of on the fence. If you look at the demos for the movies that are doing really, really well, Fast and Furious 9, Black Widows, like Suicide, all those movies that were doing well, it's the under 35 crowd, predominantly male, that are going to movie theaters. That bodes well for Shang-Chi, but it doesn't necessarily bode well for the Aretha Franklin biopic that opened last week with Jennifer Hudson called Respect. Older moviegoers are still really hesitant to go to the movie theaters. They're still kind of being very, very choosy of what they want to see. So what does that mean? Does that mean adult fare is just going to be relegated to streaming? Probably. And then maybe you'll get something along the lines of a good romantic comedy like a Crazy Rich Asians might sneak in there and kind of surprise everybody. So we just got to work on creating a product that's going to be enough to get, reluctant older moviegoers to come back in the theaters, which is going to be hard. So I'm not sure when that happens and when we get back to that sense of normalcy. Matt Damon's Stillwater, which came out from Focus, which is an adult, it's a specialty label, distribution label, did okay numbers. The Green Knight from A24 did okay numbers, but it's nowhere near where we were before. So it's just, we just got to kind of wait and see to see when we can get those older adults back in the theaters.
We're joined by Nate Adams, film critic at theonlycritic.com, with us today on the Megacast, and let's just take a look back at summer movies that are still out for distribution in some cases, and some that are finishing up their time in the box office. What are some of the surprise movies of the summer of 2021 that had more sustained success that maybe wasn't expected, and others that were expected to have a better run or be better films that ended up being more of a disappointment?
So I think the biggest disappointment of the summer, and it was kind of unfair to put these expectations on it, but it was In the Heights. It was a musical that Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton wrote before he wrote Hamilton, and Warner Brothers adapted it into a film. And they put so much marketing power into it. They really, really tried to get audience. They did a bunch of advanced screenings. They built word of mouth, and it came out, and like everybody who saw it loved it, but it just fizzled at the box office, did not take off at all. It was projected, I think, in the high 45 millions. They thought maybe it could do that opening weekend with an HBO Max release, and it ended up tanking with like $13 million. Suddenly, a movie that at one point was considered like a Best Picture potential spoiler went from zero to hero and nothing. Again, a couple weeks ago, the Suicide Squad, which debuted on HBO Max, great reviews. Expectations were high that it could really take off and over-index. Opened with 26 million. To put in perspective, the other Suicide Squad that came out in 2016, 2015 was PG-13, was not as much of a fan favorite. Let's just say reviews were pretty bad. Opened to 133 million in its one weekend, and the Suicide Squad isn't even going to come close to matching that number, let alone its entire domestic tally. So that's crazy. Stuff that's kind of been interesting to watch success rates. I mentioned Free Guy. Free Guy is now probably the biggest non-summer tentpole movie of the summer, without a doubt, with its success. A Quiet Place 2 did really well, but also Jungle Cruise, surprisingly to me, did pretty good. It opened with $35 million its opening weekend, and it's legging it out. It's almost to $100 million right now in box office receipts, which is a testament to Dwayne Johnson's continued appeal and his massive following that he has on social media platforms, and he keeps plugging the film. Even though it is available at home, it is still having those solid week-to-week holds, which is pretty impressive to see. too. So Jungle Cruise did surprisingly well from where I was sitting looking at the box office numbers.
We're joined by Nate Adams, film critic at theonlycritic.com, with us today on the Megacast. And Nate, something that's probably a very big interest to people in Detroit and in the state of Michigan is, of course, the Aretha Franklin biopic starring Jennifer Hudson called Respect that will be released soon. And for those that are curious about seeing the film, maybe they're big Aretha Franklin fans, or they're just interested because of the historical ties that Aretha Franklin and her music has, not only to the Detroit area, but all across the state of Michigan. Is this a movie that you believe is worth going to the theaters for, worth seeing, or is this one of those movies that it's, if you're interested, go ahead and see it, and if not, go wait until it comes out and you can view it at home?
Yeah, so Jennifer Hudson is terrific in the film. And I think that if we're talking early Oscar predictions, which I really don't get into the awards side of things, I think that she really does carry the film. And I think Aretha Franklin chose her to play that role, so it was very crucial. To me, though, I didn't really connect with the film, and that's just me. And I always tell people that even though I don't necessarily like something, it's all subjective. It's all an opinion. So if someone is really wants to go out and see the film and support theaters, obviously go do that, But for me, it just kind of was all over. I didn't really like Bohemian Rhapsody either. But Respect was another film for me that it took a prolific icon and it tried to throw so much at the screen, and not all of it stuck for me. It was it felt really, really disjointed. And there were some aspects of Aretha Franklin's life that it kind of just breezed through. For example, it makes the choice to end the film with her gospel album, which ended up being her biggest hit, which I'm blanking on date, but I want to say it was like the late 70s, maybe early 80s. But she had like 7 albums after that were monster hits, that were huge hits, that the film really doesn't touch on. There's a whole portion of her life where she gets out of alcoholism and she gets out of drug abuse. All that is not covered in the film, which I felt was a huge wasted opportunity. She's a prolific icon and she means so much to Detroit, and we have a lot of pride. And I know watching the film as a Michigander, I did feel a lot of pride for, wow, like Aretha Franklin came from Michigan, Detroit. Wow, this is great. But there was a lot of subplots and things like that kind of undermined the film overall for me. But if you want to see it, of course, check it out for yourself.
Nate Adams joins us on the Megacast. He is a film critic at theonlycritic.com. And Nate, just another couple minutes with you before we'll say goodbye today. And so as we're heading into the fall and into the rest of 2021, there are a lot of superhero movies that are always coming out. And they get a lot of the big draw, and they're the movies that a lot of people are clamoring to go to the theaters for. I have, of course, a contrarian opinion to that. I have a contrarian opinion. I'm not a big superhero movie fan. And so,
oh, wow.
My contrarian opinion, and that's why I went to this tension shot over here, and we'll go back to our regular shot. Looking forward to the rest of the year. What are some movies for people like me that are not big on the superhero movies that would be of great interest, or movies they should be waiting for and be looking out for to go see in the theaters?
Yeah, so I mentioned Last Night in Soho, which is we got stuff from Denis Villeneuve, we got Edgar Wright, we got Wes Anderson, we have Adam McKay films. There's a lot of filmmakers, bold and audacious filmmakers that have stuff. Paul Thomas Anderson's got a film coming out at the end of this year. So I'm a big Wes Anderson fan. I love his quirky style. He's got The French Dispatch coming out at the end of October. Edgar Wright's got Last Night in Soho. Dune, which has potential to be kind of like this Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings-esque series, where it could be expansive and have this big fantasy epic if all goes according to plan. I am also a big horror fan, so I am excited for Halloween Kills, which is the next installment in the Michael Myers franchise. And as we have seen throughout the pandemic, that horror movies still are doing relatively well. I think the Candyman sequel that is coming out this Friday, which I did get a chance to see last night, and it is very, very good, and I'm excited for people to see it. That is also, I think, going to perform really, really well. But also too, Tyler, since you're not a superhero fan, look to the streamers. Netflix has some 45 movies coming out in this corridor, including a film called Don't Look Back, which is directed by Adam McKay, and it has Leonardo DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, Meryl Streep, Jennifer Lawrence, Chris Evans, Donald Glover. Has an insane cast. So there's going to be a lot of top quality premium content that is going to be available in the homes as well as theaters, which that probably going forward will be the new normal. Will those films get released in theaters? I'm not sure, but I'm saying that there's going to be robust slate of options, not just for the non-superhero fans in theaters and at home. So that is something to get excited about. Regardless of if things are going to get moved or not, we'll have to wait and see what happens with this whole the pandemic.
Well, if there's a movie in theaters, if there's a movie on streaming services, Nate Adams will be a film critic that will have something to say about it, and you can read all of his reviews at theonlycritic.com. Nate, thanks for being with us today.
Tyler, thanks so much. Happy to come back. Maybe in the meantime, check out one superhero movie. Like maybe
I'll try.
Or yeah. Give it a chance.
Yeah, and I don't dislike them. I'm not always.
You're not invested. Yeah,
I'm not invested in it. I'll watch.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
It's probably for the best. It's probably for the best.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Nate. Nate Adams with us, film critic at theonlycritic.com. We appreciate his time. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we'll transition from movies to a more serious topic, and we'll be speaking with back-to-school mental health for kids and for families, as there's still so much going on that is affecting what is coming up in the future for our kids and for our families, for our teachers and faculty at our schools, as we continue to live in a world of nonstop change when it comes to our education systems. We'll speak with Carrie, a therapist at Birmingham Maple Clinic. Coming up next on the other side of the break, you're watching and listening to the Megacast.
To Sophia and Gabriel, even though these old knees can't follow on your adventure to the forest today, these flowers represent my love. These stitches and threads join us together. And wherever you see a flower, a bird, a beautiful tree, know that my love is with you.
Make the forest part of your story at a park near you. Find one at discovertheforest.org.
Can I ask you a question? Why did you get your kids vaccinated?
It was hard for them to social distance, to be isolated from their friends.
I want them to get back to school and sports games. So as a pediatrician, I recommend the vaccine to everyone I know.
The boys lost a former teammate and classmate who was only 20 years old. It's been a devastating year.
We want to get back to normalcy. Our daughter is really looking forward to being with her friends, being a kid.
When times get dark, we can't see the help that's all around us. When you don't know where to turn, let 211 be your guiding light.
How can I help you?
Our guides are ready to connect you with the help you need. For help with food, healthcare, mental health, and other resources. Call 211 or visit 211.org. 211. Get connected, get help.
Welcome back to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe here in our studios in West Bloomfield Township as we continue to broadcast news and information about COVID-19 and other interesting and important topics affecting southeastern Michigan, the Lower Peninsula, and all across our great state here in Michigan on Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access, and My Michigan TV, as well as on the radio on 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 WBFH The Biff as well, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Civic Center TV 15 and facebook.com/Lakes FM. And if you've missed any of our interviews so far, or you got to leave now and you can't be with us for this entire interview, you can watch it later on our website, civiccentertv.com/Megacast. As we're pleased to be joined now by a therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic, Carrie Krawiec, back with us once again. Carrie, thanks for being with us today.
Of course, thank you.
So right now we're preparing to send our kids back to school. Some have begun the school year already. Others will begin next week. And they're going into another year that's filled with a lot of uncertainty. The one certainty in most cases is that there will be in-person learning. There's not this will they, won't they as we approach the school year. There's not some sort of a mixed bag of a hybrid system. In most cases it is in-person learning, but there has to be some sort of concern around what regulations will be in place, what's going to go on with the situation with the Delta variant as we're heading into the school year. How are all of these what-ifs taking a toll on not only parents as they're preparing to send their kids back to school, but on the kids of varying ages as they head back into the classroom.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like you said, we're seeing such a variety of impacts from kids of every age through their parents, and that the impacts in those families creates a ripple effect, right? So depressed or anxious parent isn't going to be able to address as many concerns or issues or withdraw or something, which may cause an extra ripple effect in their kids' learning or mental health, and vice versa. So little kids, of course, are experiencing separation anxiety. Some of them had prolonged times at home where they might have gone to preschool or pre-K but did not last year, and now they're being thrust into learning at a little bit of a later time, and having that extra time, and of course all of the uncertainty is causing separation anxiety in those younger kids. Certainly there's anxiety amongst kids who are aware of the pandemic and what that means. There's fearfulness about infection or risk for infection. A lot of parents are concerned about how their kids will do academically because they haven't been in this in that kind of structured setting to the same degree that we would have expected in our own childhoods or years past.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec. She is a therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic. So how do we begin to address those issues then? Because there is that tension that's still left over from last school year. The summers are relatively short, but still we're dealing with a situation where, well, most of the summer was relatively a more sunny outlook in terms of COVID-19, and approaching the fall and approaching the school year. Now we're in a completely different situation that's much more concerning. And how do we begin to address the way that this situation is going to be taking a toll on our children particularly, but also on our parents, because there is so much uncertainty still with where we're going to be going with COVID-19 and how that's going to affect our schools?
Absolutely. I think, well, certainly when it comes to parenting and addressing your kids' concern, I always advise parents to tailor their responses and give themselves time and space. So if your child asks a question or expresses a concern, instead of, hastily blurting out an answer, let your child know, wow, what an important question, or I'm so glad you're thinking in these thoughtful ways. Give them encouragement. Let them know, because it's an important question, I'm going to take my time to give you a very thorough answer, and then use that time to consult with your spouse, with your peers, about what answer makes sense given what your kid's age is. So instead of sometimes we as adults give our kids adult answers to kid questions and may overshare.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec. She is a therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic, and so for students as they're preparing to go back to the classroom and they're dealing with this uncertainty, what are some strategies, particularly for older students who have a better understanding of their control over these situations, or their ability to cope with these situations, but also for younger children as well? What are some coping strategies that you would suggest that they implement, or even that their parents begin to implement with their children to help address some of these tensions and some of these issues that may arise as a result of the uncertainty surrounding the school year?
Absolutely. I mean, I think importantly first is just good self-care. It's a perfect time of the year to start doing like a more reasonable nighttime routine, get more sleep, have some structure to your day, and kind of help them ease into the idea of having, sort of a morning wake up, routine meals, whereas in summer it could just all be sort of free flowing. Providing some structure will help let everybody kind of reacclimate to that style. Teaching your kids some school skills, certainly to cope with anxiety, any kind of deep breathing exercises, what is called a grounding exercise, which is like a mindfulness technique to shift our brain from anything that might be worrisome or distracting or upsetting to just kind of getting back present to the here and now. To do that, there are kind of a variety of different strategies, but one is going through your senses. And what are 5 things I see, 4 things I hear, 3 things I smell, 2 things I taste, 1 thing I touch? A kid could do that sitting at their desk, and in that way recenter themselves to the present and out of their worried state of mind. A simple way to do it is, can I just count 5 blue things in this room, or 5 white cars in the vehicle on the way to school? Something that just takes us out of an emotional state into a little more rational one.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec on the Megacast. She is the therapist at Birmingham Maple Clinic with us today on the program. And Carrie, over the pandemic, we've seen that we have data that 4 in 10 parents of school-age children say a child fell behind academically due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in terms of the stresses and the mental health issues, children's mental health, service utilization declined amid elevated symptoms of depression, anxiety, and psychological stress for children and parents. So for parents, what should they be aware of as we continue forward with this? Because in some cases, kids are going to try to tough it out and power through it, and maybe better equipped to mask their symptoms than to talk about it in some cases. What should parents really be looking out for at a variety of different ages of children, because different ages of children will react to these stressors in different ways?
Absolutely. So I think one thing is parents recognizing themselves that they are not educators, and to defer to the educators about where their kid's level is. I'm a parent of a 7-year-old myself, and I don't have anyone to compare him to but himself. And my vague memory of my own education 30-some years ago is, are we normal or in the right place? So certainly using the resources at the school to gauge and trusting the school teachers that they would tell you if there were major gaps. And of course, we're expecting, because many of us were in similar boats, or last year and the last 2 years, that all kids will have the gaps in one or more areas, that the schools will be now over time correcting or creating a new normal for what is expected of children. I think when it comes to so not putting any extra pressure to force your child to make up a gap until someone tells you and gives you some strategies to do so. I think as far as things go, it is stressful. One, we are in a pandemic, which has caused stress. Starting the school year is stressful, even when it's exciting. Excitement and stress are really neighbors to each other. So expecting that there will be sort of like a kick in any kid and adult's fight or flight response, because we're about to do something new. Even if it's something new we've done before, it's sort of new. So it's like a lawnmower. We just got to get a kick started. So expect that stress in the beginning. But as the weeks or months go on, if you're seeing your kids distress, stress level, crying, resistance, refusal, hard time separating, maybe difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, bad dreams, returning to bedwetting, or things that may be behaviors that haven't been present but are coming back, complaining of aches and pains, stomach aches, things like that. If anything sort of goes on for several weeks, so if it lasts a long time, if it seems to be raising in intensity, duration, or frequency, those would certainly be times to reach out to a professional, have some testing done by a psychologist or trained professional, where you could get a diagnostic path and some treatment.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec on the Megacast. She's the therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic with us today on the program. And Carrie, just another couple minutes today before we'll say goodbye. Is there anything else that would be important for parents and for students, really, to know or to be considering as we approach a school year that is in and of itself going to be stressful because of uncertainty, because of continued changes? Anything else that they should know or they should be considering and thinking about as they try to deal with this stress and anxiety that is associated with the situation and is of nobody's fault? It's just the situation at play.
Absolutely. I love the quote, happiness equals reality minus expectations, meaning that if your expectations are dramatically different from reality, you're going to probably end up in a deficit and end up kind of miserable or perpetually upset. And so I think the word should is such an important indicator. I should be at a certain level. The kids should not be wearing masks. The kids should be wearing masks. The parents should be doing these things. Anytime you're using the word should, you're piling on expectations to a scenario. So to really be mindful of that, if you're hearing this is what I want, or this is my preference, really helps neutralize that experience. Because when you're saying should, you add a bunch of expectations and you could end up just being exceptionally disappointed with each step along the way.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec on the Megacast. She's the therapist at Birmingham Maple Clinic. Carrie, thanks for being with us today.
Of course, thank you.
We appreciate it. Carrie Krawiec from Birmingham Maple Clinic. We appreciate her time. Find more information on birminghammaple.com. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we'll talk about coping with another form of stress, and that is, of course, grief. There's been a lot of loss over the course of the pandemic. People have lost their parents, their family, their friends, their siblings, and other people in their lives, and have dealt with loss of experiences and other things as well, and that can take a toll on a lot of people. We'll be joined on the other side of the break by Jennifer Fresh from the New Hope Center for Grief Support. That coming up next. You're watching and listening to the Megacast.
Shot at winning big? Get your COVID-19 vaccine today. Those vaccinated within the last 24 hours are now eligible in a daily drawing of $50,000. Yesterday, someone won. Today, someone will win. And tomorrow, you could too. If you've been putting off getting your vaccine, make today the day. Don't miss out on entering for your shot to win. Must be 18 or over. Sweepstakes rules apply. Get eligibility details and enter at mishottowin.com.
People are getting out to walk and bike in higher numbers. More vulnerable road users and higher speed traffic can be a dangerous combination. Crash severity has increased, so if you're driving, be sure to slow down and look for people. There's no need to speed. If you're biking, ride with traffic. If you're walking, avoid stepping into the road if possible. If you have to walk in the street, walk facing traffic. Learn more at walkbikedrivesafe.org.
When times get dark, we can't see the help that's all around us. When you don't know where to turn, let 211 be your guiding light.
How can I help you?
Our guides are ready to connect you with the help you need. For help with food, healthcare, mental health, and other resources. Call 211 or visit 211.org. 211. Get connected, get help.
In this pandemic, there's been a lot of horrific things that people have experienced, whether it has been disease in the form of COVID-19, social isolation, the loss of friends, family, and other loved ones as well. And that can take a great toll on people, especially children, if they don't have the right coping systems and support systems in place. To talk about how we can provide that support best to people that are in that situation, we are joined by Jennifer Fresh. She is the Executive Director of the New Hope Center for Grief Support with us today on the Megacast. Jennifer, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on. For those that are not familiar with the New Hope Center, what is the basics of the work that your organization does to help people who are grieving in our local area?
Okay, so New Hope Center for Grief Support is a 501(c) nonprofit. We provide free grief support, whether it be an initial setting, one-on-one. We also run 15 ongoing support groups that are loss specific. In addition to that, we have workshops, seminars, and specific programming for both teens, young adults, and then a family-oriented program for the family unit that has been impacted by the death of a loved one. Our mission is to bring hope, healing, and new beginnings to those impacted by the death of a loved one. So all of our programs, services are free of charge and welcome to everybody that has been impacted by the death of a loved one.
And Jennifer, everyone processes loss of a loved one, whether it be direct family, a close friend, somebody else in their life that they held in high regard. Everyone processes that differently. So how does your organization and its programs address that, especially in a group setting, because everybody is going to experience that loss in a different way?
I think that's the golden ticket right there, is just really letting individuals know that grief is a normal reaction after loss. It is normal, it is natural, and it is necessary to process that loss. Unfortunately, grief is a universal life experience we all face. The way in which we face it is defined by the relationship to the individual that we lost. So it's unique and special. Grieving is not something that you can compare to yourself, to someone else. It is really based on your relationship you had with that individual. So just meeting with individuals, just giving them comfort and knowing they're not alone. Our organization follows a peer support model, so we really try to engage with those reaching out by finding someone within our organization with a similar loss and around the same age, so those individuals can connect and then get into programs that are both loss and age specific to help them find a support system to get them through their grief journey.
And how much more effective is that strength in numbers kind of model, that grief in a group model? Do you find that to be much more helpful for these people that are dealing with the grief, especially because you're partnering them with someone who's in a similar situation, so they can kind of bounce their grief off of each other, so to speak, and process their situation and the other person's situation and find those similarities that maybe help blanket it all out and sort out the situation for them?
Absolutely. We are creatures that need to be with others. So our process and our thought here at New Hope is giving you a space to grieve in community. This allows you to, be able to share your experience, hear others' experiences, and you take what you need from that group or that program, and that will help you during your journey. It's really been critical for our participants to have that engagement, especially during such isolating times over the last 18 months. When you're alone, especially if there's a spouse loss, the last 18 months have been very difficult, isolating, extended anxiety, fear that if they get sick, who will take care of me? And oftentimes their families, may have chosen that out of protection not to see them. So this organization has been really, conscious of that. So trying to provide opportunities for additional support. So adding more support groups to the calendar virtually, and then options to meet in person, following the guidelines set forth by the host partner we're having programs at.
We're joined by Jennifer Frush. She is the executive director for the New Hope Center for Grief Support, joining us today on the Megacast, their organization based out of Northville. And Jennifer, do you find that the COVID-19 pandemic has made that process more difficult, or has it made it maybe made it easier to help provide those supports to people, especially because this has been such an isolating time. It continues to be such an isolating time, and while people aren't able to have that togetherness in person and that warm embrace of being right there with someone else, they can still have that connection virtually.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I can't say it made it better. It created some unique challenges for grievers. Those individuals that may have been impacted by a loss during COVID or due to COVID often did not get to be with the individual when they were hospitalized. Many of them did not have the opportunity to say goodbye. And, with the shutdown, many were not able to have an end-of-life celebration, which just complicates the grief. So we're really conscious of that, and we spend a lot of extra time training our facilitators on how to support those individuals, but yet welcoming and making the group feel no loss is worse off than someone else's. All loss is complicated and sad. So just really engaging with individuals to give them space to talk about that, so they don't get stuck in a grief loop.
We're joined by Jennifer Frush, the executive director of the New Hope Center for Grief Support, joining us today on the Megacast. And going through that grief process, being that it is inherently messy and it is tough and it is challenging for anybody, it's especially that for children who are not quite as equipped because they don't have that life experience necessarily of losing people over time to be able to have that already established grief process in place. Your organization recently held a day camp called Grief is Messy with 5 to 13-year-olds to kind of help them through the situation with the help of their peers. How much more effective do you find it is for children in a grief setting to have their peers, people that are their age or around their age group, help them through the grief process in addition to or in the absence of having an adult help them through the process?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's incredibly welcoming and comforting to kids to know that they're not alone in their grief. They are not the only child that has lost a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, someone due to suicide, a special friend. So first thing we do at camp is we play an activity called Crossing the Line. And, through a series of questions, we ask campers and volunteers if they, do they like sunny days? Do they like winter? Do they like summer? What's their favorite color? And then we do a deeper dive into questions. If you lost your mom, please step forward. I want you to look right and left. And these kids are so comforted to know that other kids are also impacted by the death of their loved one, but also the volunteers that are serving with them too have experienced those type of losses. So right there, there's a connection. For the state of Michigan, 1 in 12 kids are impacted by the death of a family member inside the home. So it is a need and a conversation to have to support those kids in the future. But right now, it gives the kids that may be that one kid in the class comfort to know they're not alone. And so this gives them an opportunity to connect with others, but yet know that they're completely normal, and the process that they are going to go through is welcomed by a wonderful support system here at New Hope. One last thing for kids, it's important to realize that kids grieve based on their developmental age. So a young child will grieve that loss multiple times based on where they are at developmentally. So the better coping skills, the better conversations, the more you welcome their questions, curiosity, and bring comfort and naturalness to talking about it, they will have a more successful journey because they've developed healthy skills to help them at each developmental stage.
We're joined by Jennifer Frush. She is the Executive Director of New Hope Center for Grief Support on the Megacast today. And Jennifer, as you're approaching these partnerships and these relationships between grieving people, whether it be children or it be adults that are seeking the New Hope Center for Grief support in their grief process, what's your organization's approach to forming those partnerships? Because I would imagine for some people, when they're going through grief, when they're grieving the loss of somebody, experiencing somebody else's grief on top of that can maybe be triggering for some people, or can be adding additional emotions to the situation that maybe make the situation worse for those that are grieving themselves. So what's the organization's approach to making those partnerships so that they're productive for both people involved and not necessarily weighing one person's anxieties or one person's grief or one person's heartbreak on others?
Absolutely. So the goal is to connect with each griever and kind of get a sense of where they're at, what their comforts are, and what they would like to do. New Hope is obviously a peer support offering, a group dynamic. So whether it's an ongoing group or in programming that consists of groups, we also highly recommend, especially, with the trauma of going through a global pandemic, that these individuals consider clinical support as well. They've been through a trying experience that can be very traumatic. However, we work with each griever, and the care that we give at these programs is them space to talk if they'd like to, but they don't have to. And our trained facilitators actually do check-ins. So they are contacting and reaching out to these grievers on an individual basis to have extended conversations. If anybody was ever not comfortable or felt that this, triggered additional anxiety or complicated grief, we would definitely, have further conversation and get them connected with, clinical support. We'll be the first to say our programs and services may not fit everybody, but we, over the last 21 years, we've had a very high success rate of individuals that have been through a program saying, this program saved my life, changed my life, or gave me my life back. So with that, we just hold true that we're here to support grievers and bring them hope, healing, and new beginnings based on our prior loss and our commitment to serve the organization.
Jennifer Frush joins us today on the Megacast. She is the executive director of the New Hope Center for Grief Support. So when a grieving person, a child or an adult, comes into this group setting, comes into working with your organization through their grief process, what is that process of getting them into the situation and understanding their situation so that you can best provide them with the support that they need?
Absolutely. So it initially starts with a conversation, whether they contact us or someone is reaching out on their behalf. We really wait for each individual griever to reach out to us. We understand the sensitivity, and a lot of grievers aren't ready to take the step into the grief journey, to do the grief work. So ultimately, conversations take place. And from there, we have several options that we discuss based on where they're at. So they can come in for a first steps appointment, and that's where we find an individual within the organization with a similar loss and around the same age. We also can get them immediately plugged into ongoing support groups. So, just to mention a few, we have several spouse loss groups. We have a widows group as well. We have a suicide support group, a substance abuse group, an all loss group. We have 2 Parents of Hope's group, which are for adults that have lost children. So there's comfort in knowing you are not alone in your loss, especially a loss due to suicide or substance abuse. It's very comforting because oftentimes there can be shame or an embarrassment with that type of loss and guilt. So getting them with individuals that have experienced those emotions and helping guide them through the journey can be welcoming. So we do our best to kind of feel out what their needs are. We'll make recommendations, but we always encourage, if you have questions or you're feeling it's not a good fit, let us know, and we'll find additional resources. And every call, we always make a referral to several trusted clinical sources that we work with.
And Jennifer, who is eligible to seek the services of the New Hope Center for Grief Support?
Everyone that is grieving, and anyone that is grieving the death of a loved one. Simply contact us at the office at 248-348-0115. Reach out on our website at www.newhopecenter.net. And one of our staff members will get connected with you and get you plugged in to some of the ongoing program or upcoming workshops, seminars. We also provide a lot of material, so books, articles, just things to speak to some of the emotions or, caring for kids that are grieving.
And how quick is that process of initiating someone into these systems that are at play? Because especially when you're going into the loss of a close loved one, a close friend, a family member, processing that grief as soon as possible, not letting those emotions and those feelings and that loss fester can be important.
Absolutely. We find sometimes people often call too soon. They're just not ready. They'll sign up for something and then they just realize, I didn't give myself a chance to breathe since the service. However, we'll answer our call today. I mean, if you call today or reach out via email, someone will be in touch with you. We offer groups daily. So every day there are various groups going. Most of our groups that are loss specific meet, whether it be on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis. We have an upcoming 8-week workshop called From Grief to New Hope, which is an amazing program for adults. This is where the work of grief is truly done. It's 8 weeks on a Monday night. You can attend in person or virtual. And it's a great opportunity to connect with individuals impacted by the same loss and around the same age to help you walk through your grief journey. So there are programs and services happening throughout the week. As well as for our children, we can meet with the family, within a couple days of your call. And then we also have once a month a Family Friday where we invite the whole family unit in for dinner. And then we do great activities where we break out. Adults get to participate in a support group, and the kids get to do grief-related activities and do deeper dive discussions and how to develop healthy coping skills. We just did a kick the crap out of grief kickball game last Friday, which was a huge success. We had 50 parents and kids participate and just talked about how those emotions of grief can be really crappy. And first and foremost, we can't use that word after that evening, but it was a great dialogue. And that, playing kickball is a healthy coping skill, exercising, to deal with some of those tough emotions, to take those burdens and make them lighter.
Well, Jennifer, we appreciate having you on. It's definitely clear that having a group that you can turn to, a group of people, just a small social circle that you can turn to in times of grief to help you process your emotions and help you deal with the loss of grief, especially if it's someone that is a shared loved one, a shared friend, a shared family member, can be so important. But also gaining the experience and the knowledge of other people who have similar experiences or different experiences in life than you do can be very helpful in a grieving situation. And we appreciate all of you tuning in today for the Megacast, as well as we've continued to bring you news and information. You can find today's edition of the Megacast on our website, civiccentertv.com/Megacast. We'll be back tomorrow morning live from 10 a.m. to 12 noon.